All right, I'm delighted to say that Dublin football manager with the women's team, Mick Bohan, is with us in studio. Mick, you're very welcome. You've been doing the rounds this morning because you're asking girls and women in Ireland to post videos of their skills online using the hashtag #Can'tSee, to help make women's sporting skills more visible. It is all part, of course, of AIG's 20 by 20 campaign. And Mick, it's interesting just chatting to you off air there. You've kind of got a two-pronged kind of voice of confidence in all of this, where you're a manager of one of the most successful women's teams we've had in Ireland in recent times, but also you're a father of 3 daughters, which is probably just as important in terms of your own motivation when it comes to the bigger picture. For sure, and they've been terribly lucky over the last couple of years to have a lot of exposure to this group. So for them, particularly the younger two, it is part of the norm for them now that they go to a training session, that, you know, girls are playing at a high level, that they train hard, that they visit Croke Park, and, you know, that's all part of the norm. And I suppose we see ourselves very fortuitous as that's the way they're growing up, because that hasn't always been the case. You bring them along to training sometimes? I do, and not always now, because obviously there's times where you just wouldn't manage it, but the certain sessions they've arrived at, like a couple of times we've visited Magazine Hill in the Phoenix Park, and I brought them in because they're big fans of feeding the deers at Christmas time and that. But they've visited those sessions, and so they've seen the girls do hard work, they've seen them do their skills, they've, you know, seen them prior to matches and post matches. But the bottom line is that they're growing up with a skill set themselves. That's what girls do. They pack their bags, they go to train, they play for Dublin or not, but they play sport at a level just like their male counterparts, and I see that as a really healthy situation. What are you seeing as a father in terms of the best sports for a child to be involved in at the moment? Of course, the scene in Dublin GAA is unbelievably vibrant at the moment. Anybody who drives around on a Saturday morning can see that with just pure volume, and obviously the turnover in terms of great success from that as well. Are they playing other sports? Are you experiencing what other sporting bodies are doing? Yeah, I'd be a big fan of the kids trying as many sports as they possibly can. I certainly know in our case that the girls are doing gymnastics and swimming as well as Gaelic games, and hopefully as they start to get older they'll be involved in basketball and athletics. I'd be a big fan of those sports for different reasons. I think the net for opportunities for young girls to play is widening. The numbers, however, are not, and there lies the situation of can't see, can't be, that the more opportunities they have to witness role models involved in female games, the better the opportunity for them to go on and try and strive to be that whatever player, whether it's a Lindsay Peat or a Sinead Ahern, whoever it's going to be. So I think that facet is a really important part moving forward. How big a realisation is there within your Dublin camp about this, about the role that they play, about being part of a sport that is booming in Ireland, getting huge numbers, 56,000 people in attendance at this year's All-Ireland final? Yeah, amazingly enough, and obviously we came into the party halfway through because this group had played in 3 All-Ireland finals prior to us getting involved with them. But the reality being that the game has changed. It's changed the way how people perceive it. Obviously the numbers have increased for that day of the year. I think it's way more important that we focus on bigger attendances throughout the year, and the exposure of those games, those double headers with the lads, I think are crucial for the success of the game. How do we target those, and how do we increase the exposure of those? Is it ensuring that they're on television? Is it just greater marketing around them? Because it has been something that people have pointed out, that there's a small bit of a disconnect between All-Ireland Final Day and the rest of the women's year. There's a huge disconnect between All-Ireland Final Day and the rest of the year, and I would have said that last year one of the biggest successes in the Gaelic Games calendar was the All-Ireland semi-final being played in Croke Park, and not only it been played in Croke Park, but the crowds that came out to watch it. So I think they're huge parts of it, because it's not good enough just for one day in the year that we go and support, and and this leads to the question that you asked as regards, I suppose, that onus on the girls to perform on that one day. And that's what our group felt. I didn't realise it until post this All-Ireland, but one of the biggest disappointments they've had was the performance of this All-Ireland final. And while...
Really? So because of the fact that it was a poor spectacle?
Because they know that they don't get those same numbers of opportunities to promote the game. Right. And it's only dawned on me, post-All-Ireland, that that's why they're so disappointed. Because, and luckily this year, we had two outings that, you know, we played Cork in the All-Ireland semi-final in Croke Park, and it got, obviously, a lot of exposure. But normally, they get one opportunity to show off what they've worked on for 10 or 11 months. And without anybody really saying it to them, because in the last couple of years, we haven't necessarily gone after winning in All-Ireland. We've gone after trying to play the game at a level, the highest level that we possibly can play it at. So therefore, this year's All-Ireland final became a disappointment, that even though they were successful, they didn't reach the standards they had set for themselves. And it took me a while to actually digest all of that unknown to ourselves, that's where they had actually got to, that sense of not achieving, even though, you know, they had achieved. But then I sat back and realised, well, we didn't focus on winning in All-Ireland, we focused on a performance at that level, and that's what they didn't achieve. They achieved the silverware without the performance.
It's remarkable. That's one way to look at an All-Ireland final win that I've never heard before, and it's not even a question I thought of asking. I did think about the spectacle that it was, and it was kind of more on a coaching level rather than being ambassadors for your sport. But the fact that there was sort of a tinge of disappointment that as ambassadors for the sport, perhaps the day that was in it, perhaps the contest that it was, they couldn't be the best ambassadors they possibly could be for the sport, which is kind of a remarkable holistic view of the sport rather than just a singular focus, which a lot of other sports people have.
Incredible. And I certainly know that I hadn't experienced that feeling before with any other group. So it just shows, you know, innately or otherwise, however that has begun to sit in on the group, that they're aware of the fact that they have so few opportunities to sell the game. Therefore, when they didn't achieve what they had set out to achieve from the point of view of levels of consistency in how they play it, even though there was games away from the cameras that they had achieved it, they didn't when most eyes were on them.
Yeah, I want to talk about Dublin, and when you talk about a booming sport, certainly Gaelic football at the moment, both men's and women's, obviously an incredible year again, and huge congratulations. It's your second stint as Dublin manager, brought them to an All-Ireland final in 2003. It's an interesting time to compare 2003 to now. How do you sum up the differences that exist in Dublin GAA at the moment in terms of how it's being run?
In how it's been run?
Yeah, and I guess because that does feed down to coaches, doesn't it? In terms of the resources you have, and I guess specifically how the resources are managed to allow you to get the best out of your players.
Well, first of all, way back in 2002 was my first year involved with women's football at inter-county level. Willie Lillis was the manager that year, and I went in as coach. I was also involved with Nafina that year with the club championship for the 3 in a row success, and I had started my journey involved with Dublin development squads, which Brian Cullen was captain of our group at that time. So that was an incredibly busy year. And then 2003 was my first year in charge of the team, and we got to the All-Ireland final. So obviously Dublin's first All-Ireland final and beaten by Mayo. So that was the way I exited the game back in 2003. And I was particularly lucky at that time that we had dealt with an amazing group of players, and their desire to be successful was as high as anything I've ever dealt with. However, the skills have changed.
Right.
And back then, we would have had lots of girls who would have, played basketball and would have been involved in international soccer and whatever else. And some who came to the game late, others who decided to leave the other sports to focus on Gaelic football predominantly. But there was a situation where players were playing camogie or basketball in the off-season, and they were playing Gaelic games then essentially for the summer months. And that would not be possible to do now. It's got to a stage now, the game now, even though I know Still in Cork, there's some dual players and whatever else. But I would say to you, we have got to a level now, exactly where our male counterparts are, where there isn't room to play two different sports, because the skill levels now have got to a stage whereby if you neglect the game for a large period of the season, you'll pay a price. And
that's very interesting, because we're going to play a quick video clip before we wrap here of one of your coaching drills, which one of our colleagues, Tommy Rooney, mentioned that he had them doing in DCU. So people kicking off right and off left, but crucially holding two balls in your hand as they're doing this. It's available on YouTube for anybody who wants to check it out. You're also instructing them to kick with three different parts of the foot, and then they're hand passing as well. You're getting a lot in on both sides of the body in a very effective drill here. And this is the sort of thing you're talking about, I assume, sharpening people up during the season. And it is something that perhaps people don't pay attention to, that in the off-season, your skills can get rusty, and playing different sports throughout the season isn't necessarily the most effective way of maximising your potential.
Yeah, those that's what we coined complex skills, the use of two footballs. And that actually, I think that was done in Sligo.
Yes, it is.
I'm trying to think back the last time where I was at it, but that exercise, was, funny enough, was the use of 8 footballs at any one particular time, whereby you kicked with right foot, kicked with left foot, received, caught one with your right hand, with the other with the left, then offloaded a hand pass with your right and then with your left. So you're using all 4 limbs, but in a practical type of way. So I suppose that kind of stuff, we would have started way back. I think this complex skills, we started back in 2011 in DCU. Myself and a friend of mine, Tony Diamond, fortuitously came across a bag of footballs one night, 24 balls, and we had about 6 or 7 lads, quality footballers: Michael Murphy, Paul Flynn, Colin Begley, David Kelly from Sligo, James McCarthy, I think. Anyway, so obviously high quality players, and we said that was an awful waste with the balls in the bag, and we started that night with 2 footballs, and we then coined a complex skills, and it has grown, and I wouldn't take a training session now without using the 2-ball exercise.
That's right, just because you had the balls there, you said you may as well get used to them, and that's where it came from.
Pure coincidence.
And would you have been using that drill with under Jim Gavin as well in 2013?
Everyone that I've been involved with since then has been exposed to complex skills.
Quick word before we wrap up on Jim Gavin, in terms of what you've seen from the outside now, having moved away from the men's setup. Has he changed as a manager in your view, and how many years does he have left before that lust for it starts to leave him? Because it still seems that he could go on and on and on for another 5 in a row, it seems.
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is this, that we're hugely fortuitous that he's decided to stay on, because he's been remarkable for what he's done for the game, I think nationwide, but obviously we've benefited in the city. I'd say Jennifer will decide how long he stays on in the game more than anyone else. But he's been obviously an incredible ambassador for us, and he's never wavered in the way he's gone about it, from the time I've seen him as under-21 manager to now senior manager, and I for one was delighted to hear that he was staying on. And I certainly know if he decided to go, there was 3 or 4 of that group who would have been key figures who probably would have gone with him, and that certainly would have left our future in a lot of doubt.
You think Cluxton would have gone as well if Jim had said
I'd
gone?
fairly much say that, yeah.
It's interesting. Well, Mick, thanks a million for popping in. It's been great catching up. Mick Bohan, of course, is Dublin manager and a 20x20 ambassador. There was a new call to action today, asking girls and women in Ireland to post videos of their skills online using the hashtag #Can'tSee, Can'tBe to help make women's sporting skills more visible.